Hi everyone, I'm Lilah McDonald, your host for NZ Business Magazine's podcast, Sustainably Ever After, proudly brought to you by the Milford Foundation, a charity investing in local communities to build a stronger Aotearoa New Zealand. I'll be exploring the incredible world of sustainability and entrepreneurship. On this podcast, I'll be talking to guests who are making waves in the world of sustainability, those who have built businesses with a purpose, those striving to make their companies greener, and those leading the charge for social and environmental change. Liam Bowden started making one-of-a-kind leather pieces in his garage in 2005. He realised it could become something bigger and along with his partner, Steve Boyd, grew it into an internationally recognised leather accessories brand, Deadly Ponies. Not only do Liam and his team create beautifully crafted leather pieces, but they are also committed to creating a better world. Their environmental journey is ever evolving, from creating custom designed packaging to their program for reusing leather to making changes to their freight to reduce emissions. It's clear how important this cause is to Deadly Ponies. The Milford Foundation, supporting education, youth and the environment to build a better tomorrow for all New Zealanders. Find out more at milfordfoundation.co.nz. Welcome to Sustainably Ever After. I'm your host, Lilah McDonald, and today I'll be talking to Liam Bowden about how he created Deadly Ponies in his garage from a passion and some scraps of leather.
I think that the fashion industry is one of the biggest polluters, or one of the biggest industries that creates excess. So it really encourages kind of consumption and purchasing the new thing, rather than kind of purchasing the right thing to last you for a long time. I think it's really important about thinking how something is made, and then also what happens to it after it's finished its use, or is there something else that could be done with it? And so that's also what we try to do when we're designing.
Hi Liam, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So you started making leather pieces in your garage in 2005 originally. What inspired this project in the first place?
It was more of a hobby. So I enjoyed making things, using my hands, and it just kind of was a bit of a project of love. It wasn't necessarily a business that I wanted to create.
What made you decide on leather?
I had always made things out of different materials, so cardboard and wood. And then for one project at university, I started playing around with leather and screen printing on it and scratching into it. And I loved the way that it was malleable and flexible, but yet hard and could take on shapes. And so I kind of fell in love with the material.
So were you still in uni at the time when you founded Deadly Ponies?
Yes.
So when did you realize that it could turn into something big, into business?
I think I'd been doing it for 3 or 4 years while I was at uni, and then when I finished up uni. And I came to a bit of a crossroads where I had studied graphic design and so started working at an advertising agency, and realized that I didn't kind of have that much freedom or scope within my role. And with Deadly Ponies, I had 100% kind of control and scope. And that was starting to really kind of gain momentum and be able to kind of pay its way. So that's when I kind of just took the risk and was like, okay, if I'm going to do it, now's the time to do it. So, yeah.
In the early days, how did you kind of distinguish yourselves from competitors? Because there's a lot of brands out there, I guess, that do similar to what you do. So how did you?
Yes. When we started out, there was, I think that this segment of the market, there was no one. So in terms of luxury handbags, there was obviously all the international brands that had been there for years. So that was a definite kind of competitor. But because of our price point and the fact that we were New Zealand made, that we were very different, offering something very different. There were a few other kind of bag companies, but they weren't offering seasonal collections in the way that a fashion house does. So it was just kind of a standard collection that they offered year round, didn't really change, was very kind of corporate or work kind of bags. So we were the first brand to create kind of capsule and seasonal collections that would come out every 3 to 4 months in line with kind of fashion collections. So in a way, it was very easy for us to kind of stand out because we were creating more runway kind of pieces as well as our normal pieces. And I still think that that is kind of what sets us apart locally and even internationally, that even though we still do have our core kind of collection, we are still always playing with more creative, unusual elements. We're always changing up materials, bringing new colorways in, new treatments, as opposed to other kind of similar brands in the market, which might just be using one material again and again, season after season.
That's really interesting. So when you first started out, what was your kind of business plan to succeed? Were you thinking much about the future at the time or just kind of going with it?
Yes. So I think because I studied in graphic design and started to, many part-time jobs from a very young age, I was aware of a product needing to sell to work commercially. So I think the business plan was organic, but it was very much based on what I was seeing our customers kind of purchase. So we were in a number of like very unique niche boutiques at the time. So there was one called Miss Crab, and every piece we would put in there would be completely one-off. And so we would get a real good gauge from our customers and from the client relationship that they had with their customers, what would sell, why it would sell, why customers wanted to purchase it. And so that gave us a good understanding of what we could offer. I think also it's a very different marketplace now. When we were selling there was no online stores, there was no Google, there was no smartphones. So it was very much more tactile. So the landscape's kind of completely changed. And so in bringing something to market now is a lot easier, but there's a lot more competition, I guess.
Can you take me through like what the process would be now from designing a product to getting it on your website, and like what's your lead time?
So we start probably over a year out from when a product's been designed. So when looking at a new collection or new product, we will start with usually the theme or the things that we're interested in. So for the collection that we are selling in store at the moment, for example, I was in a home, my partner's parents' garden in the South Island, and it was the middle of winter, and they had all these amazing kind of lettuces and pumpkins that had these kind of bluey, iridescent kind of skins on them. So we worked with the factory to see if we could kind of create that material in a crocodile skin. So that whole process takes around 3 or 4 months of just constant back and forth development. And then once we're happy with that, we'll make that into a product. So we might have also been designing a new product along that time, or it might be applied to an existing product. And then from there, that'll be sampled and that'll go back and forth between the factories, which will take another 2 to 3 months. And then once we're happy, that'll be shown to our sales team and also to our wholesale partners locally and then around the world. And then that'll go into manufacture. So it usually takes around 3 to 4 months to make the product. And then we photograph it. It gets put on the website. So yeah, it's a full 12-month process.
Okay, wow. So do you do most of the designing here, or how many designs do you have?
Yeah, I do a lot of the designs here. It's very kind of collaborative. So we've kind of got a number of people within the design and production team. We're always kind of getting feedback from people, especially with footwear and with new bags. We're getting staff to try them on, feel them, get feedback. Would they buy them? How do they feel? Are they comfortable? How would you use them? So, yeah, it's a real team effort.
That's so cool. So where do you get your inspiration from for new designs?
A lot of it is through travel. So I might go overseas and see something that kind of inspires me or is kind of creative or interesting overseas. And then a lot of it will just be kind of plain. So we might drop one of our bags onto the ground and it sits a really interesting way. And then it might be like, well, what about if we actually shortened our bag and made it that size? Or if we made a miniature version of this bag and added this. And at the moment, we've gone to kind of a hardware market that had all these different kind of door hinges and mechanisms. And so we're looking at those and exploring those materials to kind of create a new design out of. So it can come from kind of anywhere, a chair, a bag being dropped on the ground, whatever it is, and lots of different things.
That's so cool. So you founded Deadly Ponies with your husband, Steve Boyd.
Yes.
When did he become a part of Deadly Ponies' journey?
About 5 years in. So we met pretty much within weeks of us meeting. I was roping him in and getting him to do jobs in the garage and just assisting with general tasks. And then very soon after that, we opened up a pop-up shop, and that's when it kind of really exploded because we were having, I guess, direct-to-consumer. So at the moment, direct-to-consumer, having a website, it's not that hard to do. But back then, the only way to have a direct-to-consumer relationship was through a retail store. So it meant that you needed to have, a store or a lease, someone that worked at it. So after we opened up our first pop-up shop, that's when we had to start hiring more staff, packaging, logistics, operations. It really kind of grew into a whole new beast.
Wow. So in the early days, how would customers find out about you?
Through other wholesalers. So like Miss Crab, we also were at Superette. So that was the first store that we were stocked in, and we were there for many, many years. So a customer would go in there and discover the brand and touch and feel it. But often, because our products were so small, were made in such small quantities, it would sell out. And so they wouldn't have a chance to purchase it. And so therefore, they wanted a space where they could come and see all of the product, all the different designs and all the different colors, and choose what they wanted. And that's what drew us to opening our own retail.
So what about the name Deadly Ponies? I'd be interested to hear where you got that from.
That came from when I was at university. We used to work many late nights, and I had a pair of slippers that I made that were out of goat skin, and everyone thought that they were pony skin. And so there was this kind of nickname that went around called Deadly Ponies. And so I wrote those on stickers for some kind of fun little project. And then when it came time to sell things at a market and then a Superette, I just used those stickers as swing tags, and it kind of grew into a brand, really.
That's so cool. So when did sustainability become a focus for you?
I think that the idea of sustainability and what it kind of stands for has been there from day one in terms of us using excess or things that would normally go into landfill. So I started out by going to a leather tannery that was just down the road from my house, and I would go into their scrap bin and I would leave with clean sacks because anything that you could take from the scrap bin was free. So I'd just leave with just mounds of scrap leather, and they were only ever as big as an envelope. And so to make something, I would need to sew them together to make a big kind of blanket of leather that would then form a bag or a satchel or a wallet. And so that kind of principle of what we started out involving into our designs kind of continued on. So we would use kind of small runs, excess runs of materials. We would go to different emporiums around the city that had kind of end-of-line buckles and hardware. So all of the product was very much made in that mentality of using up what would normally be kind of thrown away. And then we've kind of continued that ethos through what we do. So we often are pulling back into our collections leather that we may have not used up the whole amount of leather within our production cycle. So just recently we brought in 4 different new colorways in a small injection into our stores that were from seasons maybe 3 or 4 years old, just to kind of use up that product and really make sure that we were managing our kind of production life cycle in the most responsible way possible.
Yeah. I think leather also has quite a few benefits, like sustainability. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that leather is a byproduct of the meat industry, which is obviously a huge industry, and all the leathers that we use, we make sure that we don't use animals that are farmed for their skins, like mink or snake or crocodile. All of our materials that we use are intentionally replicated. So when we have a snake skin, that's a goat skin that has hours and hours and a lot of handwork that goes into it to make it look as authentic and real as a real life snake skin. So that customer doesn't really have to have a choice. They can kind of go, okay, why would I buy the real thing that was kind of an animal was killed for the skin? Instead, I can buy this snake skin that is made out of goat skin that is a byproduct of the meat industry. So that's, I guess, one of the biggest sustainable attributes of leather, and then also the longevity of the product. So canvas, lots of other materials, PVC, and even vegan leather, they all won't last as long as a leather product, you know. So that's why, you know, a leather jacket in an antique store and a thrift store, you know, it looks as good, if not better, than it did the day it was bought. So that's the same with bags, shoes made out of leather. So our view is that it's about making one thing really beautifully that people will use forever, rather than making lots and lots of kind of small things.
Cool. So if you go to the impact page on your website, there are a few main points, which are waste, energy, packaging, shipping, and your recycle program. So I'd love to hear a little bit about those, if that's okay.
Sure. You might have to prompt me on what the different topics are, but...
So first up, there's waste.
Waste. So for us, that's really around what goes into our product and what doesn't get used up in our production cycle. So for example, excess leather and scrap leather. So for our excess leather, we might order 1,000 square feet of a leather to make a collection, but we might not use all of that leather because it was really great quality and the skins were really large. So we were able to get really good cutting out of that material. So instead of that just kind of being sold off or put in landfill, again, we'll come back at a later date and use that leather in a different way, in a different collection. And then again, all those smaller pieces that are cut off. So when you're cutting a bag that's this, you know, as big, 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters, you've got a lot of scrap and little bits around it. So we will save all of those bits and we create a recycled collection. That's an ongoing collection that we have in store. And that's usually small key rings, coasters, things that we can make out of small leather pieces.
I also read that it's your goal to become zero waste. How far away are you from that goal, and what do you need to change to get there, I guess?
The next big hurdle that we're struggling with, or working on, I should say, is how to get rid of like our micro waste. So we've got a 40 centimeter bag, and then that creates small cuttings that are maybe 10 centimeters. Those 10 centimeter pieces are what we can make key rings and coasters out of, but then that leaves small grains of leather that might be, or small little offcuts that might be 1 centimeter square or 3 centimeters. So it's how can we use those? So we're working through a recycled leather process that kind of mulches that down, and then we can create a leather type product out of that to completely use all of our waste.
That's so cool. So when do you think that will be accomplished by?
Yeah, we have samples of that. The problem is it's about testing it and testing it in market, making it into a product that the staff here can use and wear test. So it's in the process of kind of being finalized, but it's very hard to say when we'll be happy with it as a company. So it might be ready to bring to market, but we don't think it's good enough, or it doesn't meet the qualities and the standards that we want it to. So hopefully within the next 12 months.
Cool. So will those bags be sold at like a similar price range to your existing ones, or will they be cheaper? Like how will that work, the model?
I think that the way we will use that leather will be not for the full product.
Okay. Yeah.
So it might be on a strap, or it might be when we do a leather sole on a shoe. So it might be somewhere that's more functional.
That has to look good.
Rather than the aesthetic and the look good part of it as well.
That's so cool. So another thing on your website is
Packaging.
Yeah, packaging is the next one.
For our packaging, we've gone through a really long journey, I guess, with this. So the first one that we did maybe 3 or 4 years ago was remove all of the laminates from our packaging or our cardboard. So that's all the glossy, shiny things that are on the outside that make it look really nice, but mean that it is unable to be properly recycled. And then we've also started implementing kind of removable magnets within all of our online packaging shipping boxes, so that again those can be popped out, and then that therefore makes the whole box completely recyclable. Moving to soy-based inks, again, that are less toxic and completely recyclable. And then all of our shipping and freight boxes, we standardized their sizing, meaning that we were able to recycle them and use them a lot more regularly and for a lot more different things. So rather than having to throw things out, we were able to kind of recycle them or reuse them in different ways. And then also our packaging of our products from the factory to ourselves or to our wholesalers. We've removed a lot of the plastic, and any plastic that is involved is all soft plastic that can be recycled. So yeah, all of our packaging has moved to now be 100% recyclable or reusable, which is great. And also in our offices, we have also moved to a zero waste plan in our offices. So that means that we only have recycling bins. We don't have waste bins. So we have a food waste bin that is compostable, and then every other bin within the business is only recyclable. So if you bring in a bag of chips that's in a non-recyclable bag, then that can't be brought into the building because it's only recyclable items that are able to be brought in. So therefore it's actually starting from the base level of decision making within our company to go, okay, we're going to purchase this bag of chips over this for the team drinks tonight because that is made out of soft plastics that can be recycled. So yeah, it's not just one box, it's like the full company that we've kind of thought about it.
Amazing. So the next one is shipping.
For shipping, the biggest thing and the biggest kind of carbon footprint with that is air freight. So that's air shipping products in as opposed to sea freight. So it requires a lot more planning and organization because you have to buy and have product on the boat months and months in advance, whereas air freight can happen, the next week you'll have the product. So there is definitely times where it can be frustrating, but it does mean that we've managed to massively reduce our carbon footprint by moving to predominantly sea freight with all of our product coming from overseas.
Yeah, I read about that on your website. I thought that was really interesting because I feel like it's not something that's thought about too much, the difference in between sea and air freight. But it also made me wonder, how do you balance what's good from a business and profitable perspective and what's good from an environmental perspective?
I think that the challenge I find is to do both, and I think you can do both. So air freight is a lot more expensive. So it's a lot more expensive to ship things by air because you're paying for the volumetric size of the box. So it means that if you have a box that's, 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters squared, and you only have, let's say, one glass in that, you're still paying for that whole size where you could have fit 50 glasses in. Whereas sea freight, you're just paying really for the weight or for the container that you're filling. So I guess that's an example of, or when I was talking about packaging, using soy-based inks rather than kind of more toxic inks, that's not more expensive. That's just a conscious decision. So I think we try to have that in mind at all times. So we're not necessarily making a more expensive or a less expensive decision. you can make a conscious kind of decision and it still costs the same price, but it'd be a lot different in terms of sustainability and environmentally friendly practices.
So they can work in harmony.
Yeah.
Okay, the last one, which I'm interested to hear about, is your recycling program.
Mm-hmm. So our recycling program is a bit of a beast. So in terms of a customer kind of point of view, it's about where products can come back to us that have previously been used. And so they can either be products that maybe the customer no longer needs or wants, or that they were going to throw out because for some reason maybe they've dropped it out of the car or it's been left out in the rain and it's kind of getting all moldy. And so normally they might kind of throw that away for whatever reason. So those two things are kind of brought back to us. If it's in good condition, we will refurbish it and we will give it to the hospice centre to help raise money. So all profits from those products go to the hospice. And then if it is damaged and not able to be kind of restored into a working product, we'll take it apart and recycle it. So we'll take the metal parts, we'll melt them down, and we made those into a recycled item. So previously we've done kind of paperweights and brass out of all of our brass hardware. And then with the leather and the canvas, we kind of use that for different things as well. So we will cut, again, it goes down to that kind of 10 centimeter square size. So we might make a coaster out of it. We might line one of our smaller recycled products or our key rings or these kind of smaller items out of these. So even though some of it might be too damaged or too worn or too stained to be able to be used, we'll refurbish as much of the actual raw material, like the leather pieces, into making something beautiful again and something that can kind of, again, like live on.
That's interesting. So why do you think it's important for, in particular, fashion brands to consider the environmental impact of their actions?
I think that the fashion industry is one of the biggest polluters or one of the biggest industries that creates excess. So it really encourages kind of consumption and purchasing the new thing rather than kind of purchasing the right thing to last you for a long time. So I think that it's really important that when you're creating things and putting them out into the world, people are going to want to buy things and get that hit from purchasing something. But I think it's really important about thinking how something is made and then also what happens to it after it's finished its use, or is there something else that could be done with it? Or, I guess all those kind of other avenues, because if you don't give someone that option, then they could just throw it in the bin and then it will last forever and it will never kind of biodegrade. But if it is taken apart and managed correctly, then leather can biodegrade and it can be put into compost. And there's other parts like, say, a rubber sole in a shoe that then can be recycled and used in different ways. So I think there is a lot less impact that we can have if we really consider when designing a product how that full life cycle experience of that product. And so that's also what we try to do when we're designing. So it's like, how will this product be taken apart at the end of its life? How will we reuse parts of it? And I think that can happen from a bag is something that's used for many years, but a silk top or a t-shirt is something that is kind of rotated and discarded a lot more quickly. So I think it's really important that we think about all of those other aspects.
So how do you ensure that ethical practices are used in your supply chain, especially when sourcing materials?
Yep. So we have a code of conduct and compliance that all of our factories that we use have to stand by. It's a legal document that they all have to sign. And then we also audit the factories regularly to make sure that they are treating their staff members correctly, that they're being paid a fair wage, that the working conditions are adequate, and the water recycling, all of these kind of base level standards that it's kind of meeting. And then also in terms of our factories, especially our tanneries, they're all part of a leather working group. and that they are a gold member of that group. So not just part of that group, but they have to be gold. So there's all these different tick boxes that we kind of put in place to make sure that we really vet the companies that we use. And also a lot of the tanneries and suppliers that we've been working with, we've worked for years and years, some of them 10 plus years now. So we've visited them, we've met with them, we've had many dinners and meals and know them on a real kind of friendship level. So yeah.
So your carbon emissions decreased by 41% between FY23 and FY24. Can you talk to me about what specific changes led to this, reduction?
So a big one for that was air freight. So by the reduction of air freight and just forward planning, we were able to reduce that dramatically. It's also meant that we just forecast a lot earlier and have a lot more stability to our product offering and don't change it as regularly. So therefore we're able to order further in advance and then bring the product in by sea. So that's the main thing. And that's also bringing not only a finished product, but leather. So sometimes if the leather's delayed or the hardware or buckle might be late in the production cycle, we can't air freight it in. It has to be sea freighted to its location if it needs to be freighted at all, which means that we then have to move things around in terms of our cycle and when product might drop. So we might have a product that was due to drop in February, but because of all the things that have happened, we now have to release it in April or May. So by moving all of those things behind the scenes, it's meant that we've been able to, drop our emissions dramatically.
So if there's a fashion brand that wanted to become more sustainable but didn't know where to start, would you recommend looking at their freight first of all? Is that the most important thing, do you think?
I think the most important thing is probably a lot of it is to do with the partners. So the places that they're getting the products made, maybe the fabrics that they're using, because if they are, say, buying a cotton that has been made in a very unsustainable way, or denim, I guess, can be very impactful on the environment and the way that that's produced. One supplier might be able to produce it a lot more ethically or environmentally friendly than another one. So I think it's kind of those partners that you can trust and will do a lot of that kind of work for you. And then it's just considering what you're putting into the product. How, are you buying bulk excess product that you don't need to then mark down? So that's another big, I guess, problem is it's not only the excess of purchasing, it's the excess of product out on the market that then has to be put on sale and marked down and put to outlet stores. So lots of different things.
So I'm interested, as you try different things in it, I read that you experimented with vegan alternatives like cactus leather as well. As you experiment with different things like this and different initiatives, I'm wondering, what do your customers think about all of this? Does it help build trust with them? Because I'm sure that they've come to expect, a luxury feel. How do you balance that and make sure that you're staying true to your values, but that they're also happy?
Yep. So I guess that's where it comes back to that kind of recycled leather that I was talking about earlier, and that we need to make sure that a product might be ready theoretically, but it has to kind of meet all of our kind of criteria and values to be able to be presented to our customers. So with vegan leather, that was an example of, we had been looking to try and find a vegan leather that we could use for a long time, but a lot of vegan leathers use a lot of toxic materials and a lot of water through their process. And so the one that we were able to use was involving cactus kind of arms or fronds that were a byproduct of the pharmaceutical industry and were all sun-dried. So therefore there wasn't a lot of water or machinery that was involved in kind of dehydrating the cactus to be able to make the raw material that was used in the leather. So I guess we found the best alternative or the best kind of route that we could out of everything that was kind of in the market. So that was an example of that. And then in terms of how our customers reacted. They like it. They kind of like that they can be exposed to new things. They can be educated on a cactus leather and what that means and how it's made. And then on something like a vegan leather, there is, I guess, questions around whether or not it is talking to our actual customer, because, everything that we make is leather predominantly. So someone that is wanting a vegan product might not necessarily want a leather product. But we were able to offer an alternative in that case.
Yeah, there's so many interesting alternatives out there now. It's so amazing. What do you see being the future of, I guess, leather fashion? Do you think eventually it will all be vegan?
Yes, I think eventually leather will become kind of extinct in terms of like the life cycle. I think if we kind of look at people moving away from meat, there's kind of a big trend. And I think if we look at it in the space of kind of 50 or 60 years, there's been a constant decline. So I think that once the meat industry and leather being a byproduct of the meat industry kind of has gone, I think eventually, yes, it will be a byproduct of another industry. So it might be tires that are mulched up and made into this kind of leather substance, or old carpet, or it could be many things. And I think this is hundreds of years down the track. I don't think it's going to happen in the next 200 years. But I think looking at all those trends and things that are happening, I think it's probably inevitable that it will move to something else.
Yeah, it's really interesting. What has been the most challenging aspect of Deadly Ponies' sustainability journey so far?
The most challenging, I think it is very hard to work against the, I guess, Korean washing idea that is out there. So this idea that if something is recyclable or biodegradable, that it can be recyclable or biodegraded. So I guess an example is compostable packaging. When we were looking to update our online packaging 2 years ago, there was a big trend to have compostable packaging. It's labeled on the outside of it, but unfortunately, the reality of actually that needs to go to an industrial composting facility that it doesn't exist. Well, then there's 2 in the country. So therefore, realistically, that product is then going into recycling bin and not being composted, and then going into landfill, and then is actually more damaging, or as damaging as plastic. So I think that's been a really hard, and it's not easy to find for a consumer. I can understand why it's very confusing. And as a business owner, I really had to kind of continue to ask why, how, where would that be recycled? How would they manage that? How would they look after that? To really get an understanding of the end user and, again, that full life cycle. So a lot of our bags, again, they're shipped to our wholesalers in a soft plastic rather than, say, a compostable or some other material, because we know that no matter where in the country they are, they will be able to have access to soft plastic recycling. So it's just kind of understanding that full life cycle, where these things are going to end up that you create, as opposed to just wishfully thinking that everyone's going to, dig a hole in their backyard and put the compostable bag into it, which they're not.
It's really interesting that you brought that up, because I actually had another question about greenwashing, because it is a big thing in the fashion industry and many businesses are criticized for greenwashing. So how do you ensure that Deadly Ponies' sustainability claims are genuine and transparent?
I think it's kind of being transparent. So where everyone's trying, and even in that compostable space, like, I think if that can really be done efficiently, that is an amazing kind of product and thing. So I think it's that things are changing all the time. And so I guess it's about kind of trying your best. And I think that is also why we've got that information on our website for people to kind of look at, but it's not all we're about. It's there for the people that want to know, but we're not singing from the rooftop that we're doing this and we're doing that, because we're not the pros in it. We're trying to just progress and move forward. But so I think that's it. When I think that the greenwashing thing can be quite confusing when people are really using it as a selling point for their customers. and kind of misleading them. So we really don't try to do that. We try to make a beautiful product, and everything around it and behind the scenes we try to do as kind of mindfully as possible.
What is your vision for Deadly Ponies in the future?
My vision for Deadly Ponies in the future is, I guess, kind of what we're doing. Like, I love my job. I love the variation that I have in it. I love the team that I work with, that I'm able to travel. I think just more what I really get to do kind of every day. And as long as I still kind of am continuing to kind of learn and push myself in more of that, really.
Deadly Ponies has been operating for 20 years now. When you look back on your journey, what has been your proudest achievement and what has been your biggest challenge?
If I look back on the last 20 years, I think the most proudest moment was around opening our own retail. I think there's something extremely satisfying by, I remember standing back from the street and looking at our store and being like, wow, like that's our name on the door, It's kind of like, when you buy your first car, it's like, it's kind of those pinch me moments. And the most challenging, I think, there's definitely been a lot of changes. COVID and technology changing, but I would say, I guess probably over that period of COVID, that first kind of couple of months, that was just very uncertain. No one knew what was going to happen. I guess we had a product that wasn't a necessity. Would people buy anything? What would happen? Were we going to just all shut down and all lose our jobs? So I think that it's kind of when there's that uncertainty kind of in the market or in the media, that's when it does get a bit scary. But we've been around long enough to know now that it's just a blimp in the road, and, it might be rocky for 6 months, a couple of months, but then it'll kind of get back to normal. So, yeah.
What legacy do you want to leave for future generations?
I think legacy is an interesting one, and one that I think about more as I get older. I think for me, the idea of kind of doing things mindfully and having zero waste and kind of as little impact is kind of like, I guess, a part of that legacy, so that I'm not accumulating behind us all this kind of rubbish that has been needed to get us where we are. And then I think, just to inspire other people to kind of do it. I guess, like I said, when we started out, the idea of a luxury handbag kind of brand within New Zealand was something that was very foreign. So I guess it's about inspiring more people to just dream big about it.
I was blown away when talking to Liam about the incredible business he has created and all the amazing ways they are making a difference. Deadly Ponies is already net carbon zero certified and aren't slowing down, having committed to become the world's most responsible handbag brand. If you want to find out more about Deadly Ponies, go to deadlyponies.com. Thank you so much for listening. That was Liam Bowden from Deadly Ponies on Sustainably Ever After. A special thanks to sponsors of this podcast, the Milford Foundation, working to create a sustainable New Zealand for future generations. Learn more at milfordfoundation.co.nz. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and stay tuned to nzbusiness.co.nz for more details on upcoming episodes and bonus podcast material. Let's make our world more sustainable, one story at a time. See you soon!